For the first part of topic 4, we're going to be talking about the process of photosynthesis. To start off, we should talk about how photosynthesis is an enzyme-catalyzed reaction. So therefore, it is sped up by enzymes. So this is going to be important to recall a lot of the information that we talked about last week. So to give you the basics, all right, we have some basic photosynthesis that you guys should be familiar with from other classes, namely Mr. Balco's class. So if we look, photosynthesis occurs in autotrophic organisms. So if you guys remember from the beginning of the year, we talked about autotrophs being organisms that make their own food. And if you remember from that, autotrophs mainly get their energy from the sun. So that's our first component. You need sunlight in order to undergo photosynthesis. The two reactants that you need, so our reactants here, that are needed are one, carbon dioxide, which is absorbed through the stomata of leaves. We talked about stomata in ecology. So if you need a reference stomata, go back to that. And second, the second reactant that we need is water. All right, water is uptaken through the roots, it's brought to the leaves, and then the carbon dioxide and the water in the leaves of plants then undergoes photosynthesis. The activation energy needed for photosynthesis is required by the sunlight. All right, so my activation energy, my energy of activation, is provided by sunlight. The chemical reaction occurs and it creates glucose, C6H12O6, and oxygen gas. So these are the basics. Carbon dioxide and water are provided the energy from light to undergo the chemical reaction that creates glucose or sugar. So glucose, if you guys remember, is a sugar. And oxygen gas, both things that all living things need to survive, including plants. So plants and animals get their oxygen and their carbon-based sugar, glucose, from photosynthesis. So let's take a look a little bit more in depth. So if you guys remember, the left side of our chemical reaction equation would be our reactants. So in order to undergo cellular respiration, you need 6 CO2 molecules, which means that you have 6 carbons, 12 oxygens, if you guys remember that from last year. And you need 6 water molecules. So 6 water molecules, 6 carbon dioxide molecules, chemically combine with the energy provided from the sun to give us 1 glucose molecule, 1 C6H12O6 molecule, and 6 oxygen molecules. These are the important players in the chemical reaction of photosynthesis: carbon dioxide and water, glucose and oxygen. This is something that you guys are going to need to memorize. So make sure that you guys have this chemical equation in your head. You need to memorize this. I don't tell you to memorize a lot, but this is one of those things that you guys are going to need to memorize. So in order to fully understand this process, we need to understand what makes plants green. And what makes plants green is a pigment that you guys might know called chlorophyll. If you guys have ever seen Billy Madison, you guys will realize that chlorophyll is the molecule that he's talking about when he's making that joke during his biology class. And yes, Gottler, you did make that comment yesterday. There are 2 types of chlorophyll. You have chlorophyll A and you have chlorophyll B. They slightly differ in one of their side chains here. You don't need to know that. But the thing that is important, okay, so you guys should make note, is that each type of chlorophyll absorbs slightly different wavelengths of light. And what this allows, it allows the plant to absorb more light by having 2 different types of chlorophyll. So that's why it's important, because if you only had 1 type of chlorophyll, you would be able to only absorb a certain amount of light. 2 types of chlorophyll allow you to absorb more types of light. And we'll talk about that in the next slide here. So if you look, you've got a absorbance spectrum. This is something that will be new to you, but it's actually really simple to read. Along the bottom, you have wavelengths, okay, starting at about 400, okay, and ending at around 700. And if you notice, different wavelengths of light are represented by different colors. So blue light is a wavelength of light that is about 400. Red light has a wavelength of 600 or 700, and then you have your 6.5 and 600 in between. The interesting thing about chlorophyll A and B is they both absorb different types of wavelengths. So if you notice here, chlorophyll A has 2 points where it absorbs a lot of light. So you have a lot of absorbance here, and you have little absorbance here. So this is where chlorophyll A absorbs most of its light. And if you read down, you'll notice that chlorophyll A absorbs most of its wavelengths within the 400 to 430 range and the 650 range. On the other hand, chlorophyll B has 2 spikes in different places that allows it to absorb light in the 475 range and the 600 to 625 range. And then if you notice, the only thing that does not have a lot of absorbance by chlorophyll, the only light that does not have a lot of absorbance, is light between the 5 and 600 range, which is your green light. And in fact, green is actually reflected and not absorbed. So if we come over here, you'll notice that colors absorbed by chlorophyll A are your red colors at around 675, 650. Sorry about that. You have your blue-violet light that it absorbs. On the other hand, chlorophyll B reflects or absorbed are your light blue and your orange colors. Okay, so light blue and orange, chlorophyll B, dark blue, violet, and dark red are your chlorophyll A. So another important thing that we should talk about is the anatomy of chloroplast. Chloroplasts have, the important thing to know about chloroplasts is that, first of all, they contain chlorophyll. I'm pretty sure I just spelled that wrong, but it contains chlorophyll. And the chlorophyll is what makes your chloroplast green. So if you notice in the plant cells here, you have green little bodies here. Those are chloroplasts. So this is just an enlarged chloroplast here. And the anatomy of your chloroplast is semi-important for understanding how they work. But the main things that I want you to know is that chloroplasts have 3 membranes. They have an outer membrane. They have an inner membrane. So this is the outer membrane here. This is the inner membrane. So there's 2 stacked up on top of each other. And then they have these things called thylakoids, which is the 3rd membrane. So you have the outer, which is number 1. You have the inner membrane, which is number 2. And you have the thylakoid membrane, which is number 3. And the thylakoids here are what you represent by, I call them like, they look like pancakes to me. So if you look, they look like a stack of pancakes. This is one thylakoid is one pancake. The stack of thylakoids is something called a granum. So if you notice, this is a stack of thylakoids. And these are what actually undergo photosynthesis in your chloroplast. These are the green things that contain the chlorophyll. The chlorophyll is not contained in your membranes here. It's contained in your thylakoids and your granum. Now, the last thing I want to talk about for today are called light reactions. The light reactions are chemical reactions that occur in the thylakoid membrane, so in those individual pancakes. And if you notice, this is a diagram of a thylakoid membrane, and the green parts in your thylakoid membranes are called photosystems. You have photosystem 2 and photosystem 1. And these are what absorb your light, and hence the reason that they are called light reactions is because they absorb light and therefore require light in order to happen. So we're going to go through these in a little bit of depth. I'm going to show you guys what the light reactions are. Far more depth than you guys actually need to know, but it's good to understand where our water and oxygen go and what they make. So that's what we're going to talk about. So here's my little diagram of the the thylakoid membrane. So if you look, you have your photosystem 2 here, and you have your photosystem 1. And what happens is the light from the sun is absorbed by the chlorophyll in your photosystem 2. What that does is it provides energy to split water. So if you notice, this right here is where water is used in photosynthesis during the light reactions. Water is split into 4 hydrogens and your oxygen gas here. So you got 2 water molecules that makes these products. Now when that happens, you get this energy, high energy electron that is dropped off to the photosystem that then transports itself down what we call the electron transport chain. And as that happens, it reaches photosystem 1. By this time, the electrons have lost a lot of their energy, so light hits photosystem 1, which re-energizes the electrons and pushes them down in order to attach these 2 hydrogens to a molecule we call NADP+. NADP+ attaches to a hydrogen to create NADPH. So this is a chemical reaction, and your product is your NADPH. This will be important for later on. Now, after we've created our NADPH, the hydrogens from our water, so you've got 4 of them, 1, 2, 3, 4. The hydrogens from our water come over here to an enzyme, hence the name that you guys see. It's called ATP synthase. And my hydrogens come over here and create something we call a hydrogen gradient. We have a lot of hydrogen outside of the membrane and very little hydrogen inside the membrane. What that causes is it causes our hydrogens to move downward. So they move down through this ATP synthase, which then spins and creates ATP, which we've talked about, the energy molecule for cells, from its precursor, or also known as adenosine diphosphate, so ADP. And that is essentially the light reactions. The 2 things that you need to know that are created, or the 3 things, I'm sorry, are that the oxygen that everybody breathes in, so if you're breathing right now, which I hope you are, the oxygen that you're breathing is created during the light reactions when water was split to provide the high energy electron. The other thing that is created during the light reactions is an NADPH molecule. And the third thing that's created is a ATP. All right. Now the materials used to create these obviously are water is used to create oxygen gas. So yes, the oxygen that you breathe at one time was water. The NADP+ was created created NADPH, and then your adenosine diphosphate ADP is what gave you your ATP. So make sure you fill out that chart and bring this in tomorrow, and I will let you guys work on your worksheets in class. Okay, see you tomorrow.